Oh, the prototype lobby. The place where Hypixel tests out all its new game ideas. For the last 6 years, every new game on the server has come through here before getting its full release. Or getting deleted from the server before it has a chance to be released. I talked a bit about this lobby in a different video, but that was a very surface level look focused mostly on the early history of it as a segue into the main topic of that video. My point there was that within a year or two of the lobby's launch in 2017, a ton of great and successful games were put out there, and since then, things have changed. Anyway, hi guys, my name's Flufayy. I want to talk about the modern history of the prototype lobby, and why I think it's in a bad state. Going back to early 2019, there have been 6 games put out there, which is a bit disappointing for the biggest Minecraft minigame server out there. However, that's not a big deal if they're high quality. So let's look into all of them. I think it only makes sense to begin with the games that are currently in the prototype lobby, starting with... How are you still here? Apparently, I'm not allowed to talk about SkyBlock on the internet because if I do, people will pretend that my opinion's invalid since I haven't played hundreds of hours of it. The game's just not really my kind of thing, and this number isn't even true, it's like double that. If a dozen hours isn't enough to know whether or not it's for me, that's more a problem with how the game is designed. I didn't even say I disliked the game either. I have a lot of respect for SkyBlock. It's the biggest game on the server, both in player count and in scope, has tons of stuff to do, the most achievements on the server, and it's been in prototype for 4 years. What is going on? It gets the most updates and the most attention, so it just didn't add up to me, and I couldn't find a great reason online. Hell, the forum threads I saw on this topic were years old. This has been a question for a while. Hypixel has a habit of just taking forever to release games at a prototype, but the amount of time those took don't even compare to this. SkyBlock is a good game with a lot to it, but people don't really think of it as a prototype game or a new game, because we all know this thing's getting a full release and is bigger than anything that's actually fully released on the server. I have a bit of a hunch, but I'll admit there's no real evidence to back it. If you take SkyBlock out of the prototype lobby, here's what's left. I feel like Hypixel would want something to replace SkyBlock if they took it out. Dropper on its own would be the saddest looking prototype lobby in the history of the server. There's usually at least 2 games in here at once, and with the server having not added a single game to prototype in a literal year, you want to keep the illusion of there being new games there. Now, Dropper itself is fine. I think it'll get released in the arcade at some point, probably. Thing is, the Dropper is a Minecraft map from like a decade ago. It's cool that Hypixel made its own version, but there's not much new here, and I don't feel a lot of replayability to this one. It can be a fun time for sure, but I don't know, it feels a little late for this. I'm chill with it, but having this as your newest game mode for over a year is a choice. Fact is, this has been what the prototype lobby has looked like for over a year now. No changes, nothing added or removed. Just a couple SkyBlock updates, and that game is not new. There were 4 other games from 2019 onward that led us to this point though. 1 was fully released, 1 was put in the arcade lobby, and 2 got deleted. I'll start with the biggest one, Wool Wars. Been the only full game since the Pit a few years back, and since I've already talked about it before, I'm not going to go on for long here. I like Wool Wars in theory, but I think Hypixel completely rushed and botched this game. It's based on an MCC game mode, but barely does anything to make it its own, unlike their approach to something like Bed Wars, which was similar to the already existing CubeCraft Egg Wars. Wool Wars is a glorified 4v4 duels where you die in like 4 hits, and it's outclassed by just about every other PvP game on the server. Then, instead of updating the game to make it more interesting, add new modes, improve it, they did 2 updates in a year filled only with minor changes that barely did anything. They put it out there and didn't support it. They just gave up. Speaking of games Hypixel gave up on, do I really have to talk about this game mode? What was very telling of Invader's popularity for me was that I needed to find footage for this game, and the first thing that showed up when I looked up Hypixel Invaders was a 25-view video by Duckland1099. This was Duckland's only video on Invaders. If he wasn't feeling it enough to play again, who can you trust to? This game took place in space and had you collecting resources to repair your ship, and also fighting players to prevent others from repairing their ship. I like the unique take on a PvP game mode. The problem is that this is the most boring game I have ever played on Hypixel. It's tedious and repetitive, and you have constant jump boost, which is just not good for PvP. And the game lasts like 20 minutes. I respect the ambition, but Invaders flopped hard. It only lasted 3 months. Hypixel realized pretty fast that this was not a hit, so I don't blame them for quickly giving up on it like I do for Wool Wars, which was doing well for a bit. You know, I'm a little surprised that Tower Wars got deleted. This game existed for 3 years before its removal. There's a reason it lasted as long as it did. Tower Wars was far from a bad game. There were things to like about it, and for what it was pretty fun. Not to mention a completely different experience from anything else on the server. The issue, I think, is probably the length of the game. In long game modes like this, people aren't joining new games often. Even right before its removal, I consistently saw a decent amount of people playing Tower Wars, but because it wasn't a huge player base, games took forever to start from my experience. Fun distraction though, shame it wasn't able to survive longer. That leaves us with Pixel Party, the game from this era that made it to the arcade. Maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but I really like Pixel Party and think it's one of the best arcade games on the server. I know it's basically the same thing as the Hive's Block Party, and I complained about how derivative Wool Wars was without adding anything new, but I think it's a bit different here. For one, the Hive doesn't exist anymore on Java. This is an arcade game. It's not meant to be as expansive. It's a cool distraction to keep you occupied. I think it works great as that. Plus, Hyper Mode exists. And that's it. It just exists. I dare you, start a game of it. It's impossible. The last 4 years in the prototype lobby have been a disappointment in my opinion. Gone are the days where we'd routinely get new and cool game modes like Bed Wars, Murder Mystery, Zombies, The Pit, Duels, all that. There's less new game modes, and the ones that came out after SkyBlock have been hit or miss. I like Pixel Party, but I think it's a problem that I find it to be the best game Hypixel has added in 4 years. It feels wrong for a game that simple to hold that title for me. So why is it like this? To be truthful, I think Hypixel's scared to put in a bunch of resources into games that might not perform well. Why develop an entirely new game when SkyBlock is already half of your player base? It's a risk to put something out there. I mean, look at Invaders. People spent time and money on that game and it amounted to nothing. It's been all but forgotten. So while it sucks, I get why it's like this. I wish I had an answer other than just make good games, but I don't have ideas for good Hypixel games. I just want to see the server succeed and put out good content. And now, all we can do is hope that one day, this lobby looks a lot more lively and less like a graveyard. Yet somehow, Invaders is still more alive than Pixel Party Hyper Mode.